on parental love and deadly neurotoxins, written by Jackviator. Unfortunately, in her opinion anyway, Gakdra was born one day. She'd been born of a mother who passed into the void of nothingness as Gakdra entered the light of existence. The birth had been too much for her. Her biological father, grieving and alone, couldn't bring himself to finish raising the child that he'd blamed for his broodmate's death. She was abandoned when she was 3. Broadly speaking, the cultural norms of the Serensites as a species held a very serious taboo for taking in children willfully abandoned. They were viewed as unclean, unwanted. Thus, it was often up to the rest of the galaxy's population to do so, and so she'd entered the foster system, much to the chagrin of those within who now had to deal with her. After all, she had the misfortune of being born as a Serensite instead of another, less dangerous species. No one wanted a Serensite as their kid, and when they did, it never went well. Or so it appeared. It had been a while since Gakdra had begun her foster care by the pair of humans. Since day one, she'd been waiting for them to get fed up with her like a paltry few foster parents she'd had over the years, who were willing to risk having a Serensite in their home. After all, this was a new record. No one had even lasted a single month before, so surely it should be any day now. Yet, every day that passed, there seemed to be none of the usual signs of that happening. They didn't seem to mind all the expensive modifications to their home needed to accommodate her presence, nor constantly having to check to make sure her exosuit was sealed tight when she was around them in case of any gases she needed to survive escaped. Gases that brought life to the Serensite, but were lethal neurotoxins to almost every other species in the ultra-galactic collective. Gases that, she winced at the memory, had inadvertently killed one of her previous foster parents in his sleep, and led to the foster mother nearly killing her in return in her maddened grief, before Gakdra could contact the station authorities while hiding behind the barricaded door of her room. Had she waited for them to arrive, all she had to listen to were rage and painful shrieks of her foster mother. All she had to look at was the corpse of her foster father, who had offered to sleep alongside her that night to help quell her nightmares, tragically unaware that her exosuit had the tiniest of leaks. When the foster mother had finally been restrained and the authorities finally broke down the barricade to retrieve Gakdra, they found her curled up over his unmoving chest. Her exosuit had gotten covered in purple foam his fanged mouth had produced as he choked to death in his sleep, as she begged his corpse for forgiveness in between hysterical sobs. She was 8 years old at the time. The humans didn't seem to mind that she was anxious beyond belief, jumping at every tiny sound, every hint that maybe her suit had ruptured and she was endangering them. They tolerated her outbursts, her panic attacks. They even hugged her, despite her protests that they didn't need to. Moreover, that they should stay away. She hadn't been hugged in years. She had forgotten how powerful it was. That feeling of closeness, acceptance, even through the thick material of her exosuit. That damned suit. In her previous foster homes, she'd only ever been allowed to take the suit off to clean herself in the hydrogen peroxide baths the species needed. Even then, she only allowed herself to do so once every week or two, whenever she couldn't stand it any longer. She couldn't justify doing it more than that. It boggled her mind that the humans allowed her to take it off when she was alone in her hermetically sealed room. After all, if there were a fire or some other reason she needed to exit the room quickly, even the air she exhaled would be lethally dangerous to them. She hadn't done so in the first couple of weeks, despite their protests, but relented after they kept insisting, day after day. She had almost forgotten what the feeling of air on her skin felt like. It was intoxicating, that feeling. She felt guilty that she loved it so much. After all, she shouldn't have been experiencing it in the first place. She didn't deserve it. They were risking so much to make her more comfortable, and she was always quick to remind her foster parents of that whenever they made yet another accommodation for her. Time after time, she always asked the same questions. Why did they keep doing this to themselves? Why were they risking so much every day just to try and make her happy? and time after time they told her the same thing. Everyone deserves to feel loved. Then, one day, nearing her 15th birthday and the first anniversary of their fostering her, they showed her the inoculation treatments they had scheduled. She'd begged them not to do it. The treatment for inoculating oneself against the neurotoxin she needed had a staggeringly high casualty rate despite of how extensive the medical technology the collective utilized was. Even if they survived, they risked paralysis, lung disease, heart conditions, and a host of other such dangerous side effects. At her insistence, they had finally relented and agreed to cancel them, or at least they told her they did. She woke one morning a few weeks later to find them just stepping into her room, despite her not wearing a suit, despite the vent still pumping the room with the neurotoxins she needed. She panicked, screamed for them to leave, that she didn't want to kill them. Then one walked right up to her and said a few simple words that nonetheless held the weight of the universe itself in them. We lied. The treatments were a success. We love you. Then they both hugged her. She had never felt a touch of warmth of another person in her pale, never touched by the sun's skin before that moment. She had never cried as hard as she had that day, and her weeping only grew more intense when they presented her with official adoption papers, alongside the promise that she would never go back into foster care again. For, as it turned out, the foster care workers were wrong. Only almost no one wanted a Serenite as their kid, and it only almost never went well. And that was more than enough for Gakdra. End of story. Story number 2. There Would Be War, written by WegianWarrior. There would be war. There were too many skirmishes along the border, too many traders missing, too many harsh words, too many verbal barbs and insults. And that was before the thing about the massacred younglings had hit the ether waves. There would be war, both sides knew. But even so, the Terrans had sent one last diplomat to the Imperial Court to present a document. Not a surrender or peace offer, but a document of a kind that High Adola of the Night Tadon had never heard of before. Tentacles quivered as the High Adola finished scanning it and started anew for a third time. Treaties, rules, the High Adola boomed in disbelief throughout the palace as its tendrils scanned the Terran words one last time. Laws and warfare. Lowering its head to focus on the lone earthling standing alone in the great hall, the High Adola let out a document flutter away on the evening breeze as he continued. There are no laws in war, it said in a voice that shook ancient walls. War is an existentialist struggle between opposing systems, a savage crucible that purifies the strongest by removing the slag and dross. Banning weapons and tactics for being too effective is... May I suggest that you reconsider? Emissary Josh interrupted as he deftly snatched the fluttering sheet from the air. That before you throw all caution to the wind, you ought to remember who and what Terrans truly are. Not merely what you Xenos believe we are. Josh paused for a second, looking around the shadowy hall only lit by the fluttering of bioluminescent insects, before he took half a step towards the High Adola on the cold stone floor. Yes, we drink solvent for recreational purposes. Yes, we consume neurotoxin as a minor stimulant. And yes, we use chemical irritants while flavoring our food. But it's just surface-level behavior. It is what you see us doing, not who we once were and can become again. Josh straightened up as his voice became lower and quieter, forcing the court to hush to catch his words. Over the course of human history, we have weaponized sticks, fire, rocks, metal, and when that was not enough, we weaponized chemicals, bacteria, viruses, and even ideas. We decided that it is more efficient to maim our opponents rather than killing them outright. We have turned cities to ash. We have burned fields to deserts. We have raised human nations and shattered human civilizations. We have created wastelands where the soil itself is barren 100 generations later. Yet we never achieve peace. Atrocities breed more atrocities. Another half step. The murmurs of the court pitched up an octave as the diminutive biped closed in on the High Adola. We have done things to ourselves and others so bad that just learning about it caused the complete collapse of the Ouijan Federation, and they never learned even half of it. Josh stopped, just over a step away from the Hyadala. Iron scraped against the ancient stones as the Hyadala leaned away from the looming presence of the little mammal. Do you really wish to start that cycle anew? Do you really wish us to start using weapons that we find too gruesome to unleash our inner beasts once more, so we both can find out the new horrors of unfettered humanity can come up with, and let us loose in the galaxy? We do not wish to, but if that is what we must do, we will, Josh said as he thrust the document towards the towering alien. A solitary gong sounded in the distance, signaling the setting of the twin suns. As Josh's voice dropped to a mere whisper, the court fell silent. Even the bioluminescence of the fluttering insects seemed to dim. Or do you sign on the dotted line and agree to these rather reasonable limitations on the conduct of war? End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.